So we've been talking about space weather, and so I wanted to show you a place where you can find information about space weather and other sort of interesting things that you might find interesting and useful for the class. Some of y'all might be wanting to write, for example, term papers about space weather, geomagnetic storms, and so forth, and these are good websites to give you information about that. Spaceweather.com. And so spaceweather.com is run here by actually by space scientists and has all kind of information about obviously space weather. So it gives you, first of all, here on the left, X-ray data. We talked about that in the lectures. You can actually see what's going on right now with the sun. This is from the GOES spacecraft, which is monitoring the sun. And it shows you right now, yeah, right, there's like virtually nothing that happened. There were a couple of little bitty B-type flares that happened over the last few days, but pretty much nothing of consequence. And it will also give you a real-time picture of the sun. Right now, there's virtually nothing happening, except right down here on the edge of the sun is an active region rotating towards us. And so, in fact, it says up here, new sunspot alert. There's an active region about to rotate towards us. And so information about auroras, because we just talked about how that relates. Current sunspot number is 12. Now, how do you get 12? That does not mean there's 12 sunspots. If you remember how we classified sunspot number, it's the number of groups times 10 plus the number of spots. So the only way of getting 12 is to have 2 sunspots in one group. And so that would give you a sunspot number of 12. Notice that for the last few years, there's been plenty of days without sunspots. This year, we've had 71% of the days without sunspots. We're solar minimum. Go back from 2011 to 2015, there were only 3 days total in those 5 years in which there were not sunspots. And so that tells you that was near solar maximum. Again, pictures here of aurora. You can actually get real-time aurora galleries, people submitting right now. Solar and cosmic ray radiation counts. That's also available for you right here. We'll talk more about that later. The auroral display, where it is, planetary K index. We talked about that in class. That's how fluctuating the magnetic field is. And right now, we see it is like totally steady. It's not fluctuating at all. Well, that kind of makes sense because, again, right near solar minimum, not a lot of solar activity. Current image, X-ray image of the sun gives you an idea of what the coronal holes are doing. There's no significant coronal holes. There's a little thinning there, and that's about it. Fireballs, these are meteoroids running in the Earth's atmosphere, and so that you can keep track of that. Chances of upcoming solar activity, and again, very low chance of activity. In addition to space weather, or kind of coinciding with that, list of potential hazardous asteroids, including some near misses. Did you realize that we actually had a near miss on October 12th? We had an object here that was about 5 meters in diameter that passed about 0.7 LD. That's lunar distances. So it passed closer to us than the moon, 70% of the way between the Earth and the moon. And then you go down here, cosmic rays. We talked about how you get radiation from space. It actually they actually have a group that's actually studying this, and they are flying detectors among aircraft, and so they have found here, of the last for the last day, yesterday, for example, the 5 flights with the most radiation exposure, the 5 with average radiation exposure, and 5 here that were among the least radiation exposure. And so again, this is information that you might find interesting. Okay, we'll talk more about this later. There's links at the bottom. So if you want to study more about this, or if you want to term paper on this, you got all these links that give you more information. Some, for example, you got the SOHO spacecraft. We got the daily sunspot numbers right here. The Space Weather Prediction Center. There's a link here to the Space Weather Prediction Center itself, or you can just bookmark it, swpc.noaa.gov. And so the Space Weather Prediction Center is for the United States, the premier organization keeping track of all this. And it tells you sort of what's going on. Now, up at the top, there's products and data. You get all these pretty graphics that I've been showing you in class. And it's also got information here, educational information about what is space weather, what are the space weather criteria, what are the storm criteria, et cetera, et cetera. Over the last 24 hours, what are you seeing? And if there are storms, this would actually be a 1, 2, 3 or something to indicate it's R1, R2 or whatever, S1, S2, G1, G2. So this is geomagnetic storms. This is radiation storms, and then the R is radial blackouts. Okay. Latest images here, extreme UV image here, also coronal mass ejection, information about that. You can actually watch, a video here of a coronal mass ejection, and what's going on with the sun right here. Again, you don't see much there because this is currently what's happening, and right now there's not a whole lot going on. Gives you an idea what the auroral oval is right there. Again, some of these other graphics that we've already seen. So all this information is available for you online. And if you're really interested in space weather and the aurora, you can actually sign up here for space weather alerts. The emails are generally free, but if you want to get text messages of when there's an aurora visible in your area, then you got to pay a fee for that. Auroras are very, very rare this far south. But if you know there's going to be a major geomagnetic storm, you might want to be, paying more attention to that. So here I thought this would be an interesting way of giving you information. So you've now got some ideas here about where to look online for information about space weather.